There was a trailer. It's a book, and there was a trailer, Patricia.
There should be trailers for all books, don't you think?
I understand, but I wasn't expecting that, and it totally put me in the mood. I see crime tape, and my heart starts to race.
I know. Hello.
Hello, viewers, partners, 153 participants. My name is Jamie Lee Curtis. I am very happy to be here on behalf of, not on behalf of HarperCollins, but at the invitation of HarperCollins to talk to my great friend about the new Scarpetta book, After a Long Effing Wait. And we will discuss the long effing wait immediately after I introduce her. I don't think I need to for anybody who's already here. All of the chat already is talking about people who've read everything you've ever written, the Scarpetta and beyond. And it's thrilling for me to be here. We met socially and have become very close friends. Our spouses are close friends. And when you get to know someone and you get to know their integrity and who they are and what they think and feel and the depth of their soul and their mind, it then makes you go, oh, duh. Well, no wonder the depth of the writing is so powerful. And that's certainly been my case with Patricia Cornwell, who, as y'all know, has sold, 115, 120 million books, 120 countries, won every crime writing award that there is to win, and most importantly, really gave birth to the current spate of crime of shows like CSI and those shows that we have become devoted to and have a huge fan base. Really owe it to the hot blonde sitting here, not here with me, but here with me virtually, Patricia Cornwell. Welcome.
Hello,
my friend.
And hello to everybody out there. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, we're getting a lot of chatting. A lot of people want to know a lot of. She's like, where can I find a copy of Jack the Ripper? We'll discuss that later. Okay, why did Scarpetta go away, and why did you decide to bring her back? Like, what? We are so happy to have her back. I feel like she is ours. So she took a long sabbatical. Why?
When I finished Chaos, the 24th book, I was kind of at my wit's end, not knowing really what to do anymore with the series. And I was feeling overwhelmed by all the backstory. You create all these stories along the way, and then you got to remind everybody of this, that, and the other. And it's almost like, I almost would say that in hindsight, I kind of feel like she fired me. And she said, you know what, go learn something else, because you're really getting to be a drag. All you do is get me killed, shot, take people away that I care about. And the serial killer then escapes, and I have to catch him in the next book. So literally speaking, though, I decided that, this was time to quit while you're ahead. And I quit the series 5 years ago. I was never planning on coming back to it. In fact, for a little while, I wasn't even thinking I'd write books anymore. And then I wanted to do the space thrillers. And it was very clear that those needed to be books. I was hoping eventually it would be TV. But long story short, had I not gone and started the new research, going back to Interpol, going back to Scotland Yard, cruising around the White House to get the lay of the land, and most of all, doing the things with NASA and aerospace companies and artificial intelligence, trying to learn what's going on in the world today. And then the pandemic hit. And like everybody else, I found myself unplugged. I mean, I finished, the second Captain Chase book, Spin, came out last January. And then I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm locked down. And I started really, really evaluating life and the future. And I thought, if there's anybody that has something to say now in this world gone so amok, it's our friend Scarpetta. And that's who I would like to talk to right now. I'd like to walk into her garden, and I saw it in an old place, Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. It kind of popped into my head when I was thinking about this. And I imagined I'd like to go in the garden there and sit down at the wrought iron table and talk to her and say, what the F are we going to do now?
Well, it's interesting because you've incorporated those very new technologies and new passions of yours that for those who are an uninitiated Patricia Cornwell devotee. Let's just say there's some people here who are not. I know there are many, many who are.
Well, most of them are here because of you. Let's just start with that. And they're waiting for when the Halloween stuff is going to start up.
Yeah, because I'm going to talk about that here. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to say is, you do a deep dive. I've known you now, 6 years, 7 years, and all I get are postcards of you at NASA. You're either on a helicopter somewhere, you're in some forensic lab, you're with these huge weapons, you're really involved in the space exploration, you're at some AI conference where you can't tell me where you are. Obviously those elements are all throughout the new book. And we'll talk about that, which is, I think, one of the things that people are very excited about. But you've been doing that research for a very long time. Can you just tell us all more about what drives you in the sense of that interest in something, that passion that you have for, as you said, these new terrains, these uncharted territories?
Well, I think I never grew up. And the child in me is insatiably curious, is full of wonder. And it reminds me of, I was probably about maybe 10 or 11 years old, living in the 200-member town of Montreat, North Carolina, outside of Asheville, in the middle of nowhere. But Billy Graham lived up the road. And so you never knew what might show up in your little town. And one day, good old 91, my orange bus pulled up to my little stop and let me out at the bottom of the hill where I would walk up to go home. And there, parked in the grass, was a helicopter. And this was the 1960s. And it looked like MASH. And I'd never even seen one in the air, much less that close. It was like a UFO on the ground. And I walked around it, looking at it, and I was awestruck. And of course, I never thought that someday I might own such a thing and fly it myself. But the point is, I want to walk into those places. I want to see what's there. I want to walk in the morgue. I want to walk in, I want to walk into the crime scene. I would love to see our planet from above, like these people are doing who are launching these days. I can't imagine the wonder, because I felt it at NASA. They were very kind and generous and put me through a lot of simulations at Johnson Space Center to get the feeling of what the astronauts, their unbelievable training, and what little bit I got, the virtual reality of being on a spacewalk, and it's all their video that's knitted together. I mean, I was dizzy after it, and I was overwhelmed because I really felt that I was looking down on Earth, I just don't know why anybody wouldn't want to have an adventure. And look, for all you artists out there, if you're not curious about anything, you better go to art therapy, because the child in you is not happy.
Okay, but so let's just talk about space, because we're talking about NASA and about your deep dive in the research. You've included in a very gripping thriller character piece, wonderful new character combinations, characters from past books who are now aligned. But in the middle of it, there is an autopsy done in space. Now, the visual of that alone, you can only imagine. We, as the reader, are sort of trying to imagine, where did that idea come that there was going to be a crime in space, and that in order to determine what happened, Scarpetta was going to have to lead somebody was going to have to walk. Like many of us have seen, do you remember the Airplane movie?
Yeah.
Remember Airplane? Not this funny one. No, there was a scary one where something happened and the pilot died, and somebody had to talk somebody through landing the airplane who had never landed an airplane. And I remember just that tension of having somebody in your ear saying, this is what you do, pull back on the thing, push the thing, blah, blah, blah. That's what it seems like in the new book. Can you just talk about that sequence? Because I think obviously people are thrilled by it.
You know, wherever humans go, we will import our trials, our tribulations, our tragedies, and our crimes. And so as we venture into space more, whether it's on space vehicles or in orbiting laboratories like the International Space Station, in the commercial ones that are just around the corner, the scenario that I have in Autopsy is absolutely plausible, including the kind of research that they're doing up there, because there are things that you can do without gravity that we can't do down here, not easily. And so all of this that I show you, and I won't go into too much detail, but it's just being realistic. We're going to have bad things happen up there. And what are we going to do about it? And look, my stock and trade is worst case scenario. And that's what Dr. Scarpetta is around to fix. And she's also there to anticipate bad things that can happen. And on the Doomsday Commission, that's her new appointment in Washington now that she's the chief medical examiner of Virginia again. She's also got this federal position, and that's one of her jobs, is to help anticipate the terrible things. Like, for example, if people are using high energy weapons, like the Havana syndrome we've been hearing about, or if people are trying to take out our satellites in space, well, how does that affect Scarpetta? Well, there could be a lot of death and damage that come if you wipe out someone's infrastructure because you take out their satellites up there, or you have weaponized satellites up there that are aimed right at our nation's capital. Death and mayhem are what she is her currency. So I'm thinking, what are we going to do, and what would she do? And here's the fun part. You know, forensic science or forensic anything is simply about something that applies to legal cases. So you could have space forensics. That's simply, we've had it before. When they take a material like a heat shield and they look at it with a scanning electron microscope to figure out why it failed, that, my dear, is space forensics. But you're going to have it up there. And Scarpetta shows, well, what do you do when someone bleeds? There's no gravity. It doesn't drip. Imagine a bloody mess when there's no gravity to make blood drip, and bodies don't fall over. They float around and do strange things that are very unattractive. I know NASA will never want me to do anything because I'm supposed to tell you how wonderful it is. All wonderful, but
it isn't all wonderful. It can't be, because the world is too uncertain. And what you're talking about is both sides of it, the mystery of that science, the magical aspect of space exploration, Space Force, etc., and at the same time a very dark connection to it also. I think space is like the most hopeful thing that we could ever be studying. I mean, because if we really get to the bottom of things, we will discover who we are and where we came from. And I mean that seriously, because if I would be so depressed if I thought that we are all there is in this big grand universe. I would think someone could have done a little better than that, especially these days when you look at the news. But it's also, space is an unfriendly place. You know, we are used to gravity. We need air. We don't live in a vacuum unless you have a really bad relationship with somebody. And so what we got to know what those dangers are up there. You know, our military people who are in Space Force, our astronauts, everybody's got to know that, for example, if you're up there on an orbiting laboratory, or if you had a little visit on the space station, you better hope your fan is working in your crew quarters, because if the air isn't constantly moving, the carbon dioxide that you exhale will just gather around your head in an invisible bubble, and it will suffocate you in your sleep. And so that's why they have fans blowing, one of the reasons, and something that wouldn't happen down here. And we don't think about it because it's invisible, just like viruses are and cyber attacks. So it's really, as much as I want to thrill people and give them adventure, because that's the whole point too, but I also want to show you, hey, this is what things are like. Learn about it. It's good for you. I know, but what's so amazing is you have the ability, and somebody wrote in the chat that was a spoiler alert, that there was an autopsy done in space. I'm unfortunately. I don't know why. Who did it?
You don't
Well,
know
of
who
course,
did it. It
I'm
might
not
have been
going to tell you.
extraterrestrials who did it.
I'm not going to tell anybody anything about like who did it, but these are really, first of all, you've been talking about the space on television, and obviously people are aware of it. But what I also love is that the book does go into technologies and AI. You know, your Captain Chase series, the two quantum books, well, Quantum and Spin, they both employed a lot of AI, a lot of these acronyms for these technologies that are something that's very real, and yet most of us just don't come in contact with it. And what I love about the book is that you go into that world. Lucy, of course, is someone who is heavily invested through her own ingenuity in AI. And at the same time, there's just that gritty, Alexandria, Virginia, Washington, D.C. mess. That mess of power, that mess of people trying to hold on to their power, people trying to cover up things. And what I love is that Scarpetta comes back. For the uninitiated reader, she used to be the chief medical examiner, and she left. And now she's coming back. She is stepping back in, but it's not the same office. She doesn't have the same allies. And one of my favorite characters in the book is Maggie Cutbush, who is her secretary, who is the assistant that she is given. And I just love that in the middle of all the space and the technology, which is something that you, Patricia, knowing you, following you, getting pictures of you in spacesuits from all over the world, at the sort of core of the book is just a really good investigative, journalistic investigation with fantastic characters. So I just want to talk a little bit about why you chose to sort of put her in the sort of the den of not allies. It's such a wonderful world she enters. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
A very wise actress who's very good at coming up with stories and how things work told me that you've got to have conflict. Isn't that right, Jamie Lee Curtis?
Oh,
she said, we were talking about this book before it was even done, you and I, and I listen and I learn. It's just like David Heyman, the Harry Potter producer, said, you got to have a great villain. And I said, well, how do you create a great villain? What's a great villain? He said, someone who thinks it's, is a good person, but they're a villain. And you reminded me that conflict, and that harkens back to post-mortem, because when she first arrived in Richmond 30 years ago, she was the new girl in town. It was an all-boys network. She was there to clean up after the former chief, who was a drunk and never showed up at crime scenes. So the cops weren't used to having the medical examiner weighing in, and that's how she met Marino in the beginning, and it was, this was not good. So now you can't continue to have that conflict every single book, not the same kind. But as I returned all this to the beginning and relaunched it, I said, she's got to be up against something bad here. This cannot be that she comes in on a white horse. Hello, the hero is back. Oh no, they don't want her. The fiefdoms don't want her. The network doesn't want her. All those cases that have been buried, and the conspiracies that have gone on, the power mongering, because this really does happen in the medical examiner world. Well, forensic pathologists will have politicians that will call them and say, that really wasn't an erotic asphyxiation. The guy was doing stuff. I think he just killed himself. And I think all that leather bondage stuff kind of could disappear, couldn't it? The answer is, oh, no, it can't. You see what I mean? So she comes back to Virginia, and her worst enemy is her own secretary, Maggie Cutbush, who she's straight out of Dickens, like the evil one who wouldn't give Oliver Twist a little more. May I have a little more, please? No, you may not. So I wanted to do that and keep it rooted in the terra firma, which is pandemic and the civil unrest and the January 6th and things boarded up and monuments being torn down in Richmond. And also, but oh yes, you've got to have a serial killer in her neighborhood. to keep her busy, because she can't just be working something in outer space. I mean, there's other things that go on too, but the root of what's going on is that she's got a body in her cooler, a woman found on the railroad tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, she's going to find out that it's linked to other stuff that nobody's paid attention to. And so it's the old stuff, but I'm giving you new stuff while I'm at it.
Well, and the old stuff includes old relationships. So what I love is that, and again, spoiler alert a little bit, Marino is back, but Marino is now in a relationship that Marino wasn't in 5 years ago. And
when we left Marino last, he and Dorothy, Scarpetta's sister, were sort of being a little flirty with each other.
But they were being flirty, but they weren't in a relationship.
No, they weren't like that. Not like in this book. And
right.
I don't know what all you readers out there are going to say about why Marino ended up marrying Dorothy. Do you think it's because he couldn't get Scarpetta? I didn't say it.
I didn't say that.
What's that going to mean? What's that going to mean going forward? I don't know. I don't know anything. I just take notes.
Oh, that's such a good quote. I'm going to write that one down. I do love that you have chosen through your channeling of Scarpetta to put her and Marino and Dorothy and Lucy all in very close proximity to each other, close proximity that creates tension, whatever kind of tension, but it also creates
poignancy too.
Poignancy and the root, the grounding of any good story, which is the human contact between people and characters, and danger. Because of course, there is danger. There's always danger when you're a challenging person like Scarpetta. And there is, again, spoiler alert, the book deals with poisoning. It deals with synthetic opiates and these opioids that are very common nowadays. And we're hearing more and more about these synthetics, these and how they are distributed and dispensed. And there's a lot of that in the book. And it also kind of calls into question the relationships, because of course, you know, if one of your main characters is poisoned or gets very close to being killed, it throws all of those relationships back in. I just think you did a masterful job of weaving all of that. And is it something that you have been following all of that? I mean, obviously the opioid problem around the country, around the world, but is a big problem.
I do keep up with the things that are going on out there. That and I know the types of things that are killing people. You know, when they think they're getting some sort of opioid, that they don't realize that there's fentanyl in it, or worse than that, the derivatives, variants of fentanyl that are so much more powerful and deadly. There's so many things that to be worried and to be careful about. And so, yes, I do keep up with these things. And, you know, one of the things that's helpful is that so many people who work in these real professions like the Secret Service or NASA or medical examiners or some other types of scientists are my friends. And, you know, and as you know, with our own relationship through osmosis, you learn a lot just from kind of sharing the airspace with somebody. And so that's what, you know, so I pick up these things. And of course, Stacy works in a field where I hear a lot of this kind of stuff, my partner. And I mean, she's a scientist also. So that makes a very big difference. But you make a real important point, and I think the readers who are familiar with Scarpetta would be very appreciative of, it's very cloistered in this book. Benton and Scarpetta have bought an 18th century property in Old Town, right overlooking the Potomac, and it's a rundown thing, needs a lot of work, but it's in the area where George Washington once was a surveyor, an old part of the world. Lucy lives in the guest house on their property, and you'll see better why she sequesters herself and what she's doing inside that little cottage all day long. Then you've got Marino and Dorothy, who are right around the corner in a condo on the river, where he's got a motorboat and his motorcycle and all the other fancy things that Dorothy buys for him that kind of gets under his skin occasionally now and then. But so they're right there. Everybody's together and getting along, and they're all scared about the same thing as, this murder. The lady in the refrigerator is way too close to home when they begin to realize exactly where the crime scene was. So in that regard, it's back to the days of kind of being a small town thing.
So I want to let a bunch of people ask questions because they're so good, but I just want to bring up one other thing that, if you remember from the first time I read it in galley form, there's a moment where people are trying to sabotage Scarpetta in her new job. She comes in to sort of do her work. And of course, the people within that office are trying to scuttle her by, not leaving her examination kits intact, taking stuff. And there's a moment, what I love is that this book has space and AI and wonderful characters. And then at the same time, she has to make her own luminol. Mm-hmm. Like she actually has to create her own, equipment to do the job. And I just love that weird, like it's literally like DYI CSI.
Well, it's like it's everything is about rhythm and contrast. You think of music, you have a crescendo, and then it's followed by a pastoral or something quiet. And so when you're going to overwhelm people with there's a dream chaser space plane flying through the ether, heading to this disaster site of this imperiled orbiter, and astronauts going in and all that stuff, then what you really want to have is that Scarpetta. She got a hunch that she wants to go look for something, and luminol gives a false positive for this particular thing, so you could use it to find it because it will light up after dark. So she goes in her closet right there in the office with that old nasty Maggie's watching, and she's rummaging. Where's the blue star, the reagent that I use for this? It's all mixed. It's perfect. It's easy, and it's much more convenient. And it's gone. Oh yes, so-and-so came in and needed to borrow it and didn't replace it. So she's got to go get this and get that and put it all in her little kit and go off to the railroad tracks in the middle of the night with Marino, and she's mixing this, shaking it up. Spray, spray, spray.
There's a wonderful DIY part of it that I also think grounds this. It's as much as there's this other stuff of tech and AI and space, there's also this really human, it's almost like you or me could go and mix this stuff.
You could.
And you could. I'm not going to.
So part of the thing I want to show people is that you can do these things. You can. You will be amazed at what you can do if you try. I mean, I have no sense of direction, and yet I learned how to fly a helicopter. And I still get lost everywhere I go. I got lost on my first solo, for that matter. But you just carry on and you keep doing what you do. Be more resourceful. And people like space. You don't have to be a physicist to understand some of the things that are going on out there. All you got to do is be interested. And you should be interested in things that are interested back. And all of these things are interested in us too. It's what makes us who we are.
Okay, I'm going to start getting into questions. Lisa Grimes wants to know, have you ever tried using a VR headset like Oculus?
I have tried. Hello, Lisa. I know who you are, and it's nice of you to be here. When I was doing the training at the research at NASA at Johnson Space Center, one of the things they would do is put the VR goggles and stuff on me, and you would be in this room, and they put a tool in your hand and other things, like you're on the space station and you've got the virtual reality, and you're supposed to like move a cushion or something out of the way, and there's no gravity, so it goes sailing when you, and it's really weird because it looks like you're doing this stuff. So yes, and remember, for those people who go into space, you never go into space until you go into space. So all the training they do is virtual, really, or it's in their neutral buoyancy swimming pool with the space station under the water, the mock-up, and the scuba stuff and all these things they do. But most of this is virtual, and their virtual reality, I mean, if you could get the overview effect from virtual reality, I think I did from doing that spacewalk. But most of all, from all my years of research, I have what's called the underview effect.
Okay, you're hilarious. This is a real question from Jane Taff, which is, how do you keep track, and it's such a good question, how do you keep track of all your characters' developments? Do you work, when you're writing, do you use cards? How do you keep track of it? Because there are a lot of people, each one has their own huge life, because that's what makes them such great characters.
I do. I have an artificial intelligence research assistant named Christine, who's really not artificial. And she is retired from NASA. And she is a medal winning NASA scientist. And she has the whole database of all the Scarpetta stuff. And I say, Christine, what color eyes did that person have who died, and what did they die of? Because that was like, I don't even know how many books ago. And now I get the report back, and I kid you not, that is what I do, and because I can't keep track of all this stuff, and you can't get it wrong.
Well, yeah, big time. You can't get it wrong. So interesting. Okay. Amy Splain would like to know, of all the cases the K has been assigned to, this is going to be a really good question, which one is she the most proud of? So out of all of the, I know, right?
You know what? I would think that right now she would be very proud of what she just did in space with that case, because for two reasons. One, she has to acquiesce her power and control to other people so they can be her hands up there. And that's a hard thing to do, to have somebody else pick up a scalpel or forceps or whatever, someone who's not even a doctor. And for her to be able to do that and do it as gracefully and graciously as she did, I thought was remarkable. And I say that as if I had nothing to do with it, but I'm kind of sitting there watching it. The second thing is, she'd be very proud of the fact that she never gives up on a detail. You know, something that someone else doesn't think is important, like the funny little piece of plastic that somebody found up there. She's not going to rest till she makes sure she knows what that is, because that's going to tell a very big story about what really happened up there. And so I think, but that's a good question. But right now, I'd say she feels really good about that because she made it work without being there in person. And that's a real feat, if you ask me.
Yeah. Michelle Farnham would like to know, what is your connection between Italian food and Scarpetta cooking delicious meals in your books?
Gluttony. My connection is just that. I've always loved good Italian food. And when I first, quote, created Scarpetta, or more likely discovered her back in the 1980s, when she sort of popped into my head, the name Scarpetta, my Charlie, who was my husband back then, he was always telling these funny stories about his landlady at University of Virginia, whose last name was Scarpetta. I'd never heard that name before. I said, wow, what a name. So I'm going to take that name, but what ethnicity do we make this? And I said, well, I'm going to make her Italian because I like to make pizza and I like to cook spaghetti. And also, but really, the other thing is I wanted to make her Italian because, to use an old phrase, there's a fearful symmetry between the Italian culture and what you see when you go in the morgue, which is colorless and sharp around the edges and cold, and the sounds of steel clinking against steel and water drumming in a sink. And it's not. When she goes home, she wants to hear music, smell flowers in her garden, and make something wonderful to eat with her own hands and have her friends sit there. That's what she wants to do.
Sally Erickson would like to know, by the way, this is what I love about Zoom. And we've all done them. And it's been now coming up 2 years in March that we will all have started. I had never done FaceTime with my kids before. People would say, let's FaceTime. I'd be like, I don't FaceTime on my phone. And now so someone has observed something in your Zoom. And it's Sally Erickson, and she would like to know, there's a model behind you in the bookcase, an Apollo with a lunar landing module. Is there a history behind that?
I have a couple models in here that are autographed by Buzz Aldrin. And I had the
Ooh.
distinct pleasure. He doesn't know me, but many years ago, I was at a congressional hearing in Washington, and I was sitting in this front row, all by myself. And he comes walking in, and he comes and plops down right next to me with his flag socks on and his pins and his little footprint on the moon pin, and he just comes right up next to me, and it was like I could not believe this, and I thought, I there was something so amazing about sitting next to someone who's walked on the moon. And so he sells his stuff online. I didn't get anything special here. I bought a couple of them. I wanted to have them, and I also have a model of the space shuttle that my NASA researcher friend gave me. I have a model of the Dream Chaser space plane, which is in Autopsy. It's a real thing. You're going to see those things zipping around up there pretty soon. They're mostly for carrying cargo right now, but they can carry crew. They probably will. So yes, I do have some fun things back there.
Yes, it's fun. We've all done it. By the way, that's a picture of me and the Dalai Lama when I went to a conversation with the Dalai Lama and Houston Smith at UCLA. And that's my little girl, Annie, behind me, and me meeting the Dalai Lama for a second backstage. And it was a thrilling moment. And I have other items, but you're not going to get to know what they are.
Well, I don't have I don't have the Dalai Lama. That'd be almost like having God sign something.
Well, he didn't sign it. He just looked at me and was lovely. I know it's now, we're good. And we will get to TV, everybody. So just hold your horses. I'm going to ask this question, which will lead us into TV. Dawn Shoemaker, do you think Dr. Scarpetta will encounter another serial killer that will go across multiple books, similar to the way she encountered Temple Brooks Galt and Cary Grantham?
I don't know, but it could happen. I don't know. Right now I know about as much as you do about what she's going to encounter next in terms of another serial killer. But, the problem, sometimes it's hard to have that in the sort of things that I set, because I set what's really more like what happens in the real world, and it's usually not a villain that goes on and on and on. But there could be a day. You're giving me an idea. You shouldn't do this. I mean, I could see where she could have like a Green River Strangler type thing, something that's been going on for years. Oh, I kind of like this idea. And that it's in the background, just playing there, and goes on, and every now and then it raises its head, but it's not going to get solved, but it's not the main thing. So maybe is the answer. Maybe. I get a lot of good ideas from you guys. You got really mad when I killed off Benton Wesley. I didn't really do it. I wasn't even there when it happened, but that's why he came back. So I do listen.
Okay. So obviously quite a few people have asked about seeing Scarpetta on the screen. And here's what I can tell you as the producer of the TV series Scarpetta. It took us a long time to get there. Many people have been trying to bring Scarpetta to the screen, and I feel very fortunate, daunted in the undertaking to bring Scarpetta to a television streaming screen for you all, the fans, in the near future. I can't really tell you much about it, the process, except that we do have a writer who is busy right now sort of contextualizing how we're going to take 25 books and how we're going to enter the storytelling. So it is happening. We are right now in the middle of that creative process. It's a process, as Patricia knows, as a writer, where you have to let the writer do their thing. It's not something where a lot of people can be giving input. Once it starts to get a framework, then of course, all of us, Patricia, myself, and the great team at Blumhouse will put our thoughts into it and our contributions. But we are very excited, and I've had a bunch of people here say that I should play her, and that's very kind of you. I will not be playing Scarpetta. I will be producing Scarpetta along with my friend Patricia, and she will be working her ass off, whoever it is, and I will not, as I am here in California, with my lovely husband, who is also a big fan of Patricia, and we are a friend group with Patricia and Stacy. I'm going to let a couple more people.
Well, you're going to have to play something. You're going to have to play
Oh,
something.
just hold on.
I'll write a role for you, whatever you want.
I know you will.
Play something.
Do you have a special place that you write that inspires you?
Well, I just have offices. Like you're looking at my writing office in Boston right now. And this is where I sit, except that normally my chair's on the other side of the desk, so I'm looking that way instead of looking here. But I wanted you to, almost look like, hey, maybe a real writer works there. So wherever my residence is, I'm going to have an office, and it's my quiet place. This is, I come in here and I shut the door, and it's soundproofed, so I don't hear noise because I can't stand distractions. And I always compare it to, I say it's like Alice going through the looking glass. You got to go to that place so that I'm not really sitting here trying to think about what they're doing. I'm trying to watch what they're doing. And if I don't get it right, I keep going back to where it was working. And then I follow her down the corridor again. And she stops and talks to that person. But this time she says something that works better. And I go, oh. So that is what I do. And I live with it. When I'm awake at night, I think about it. I'm never really away from it any more than I'm away from a relationship with somebody I care about. It's always there.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine, given how long you've been in a relationship with Scarpetta, that she's very far from your thoughts, because it feels so integrated into you, you to her, her to you. It's a beautiful partnership between the two of you, and I think we're all feeling the benefit of it. I have two last questions for you. First one is from Carol Wagoner. I want to help my daughter develop a love of reading. What is your favorite young adult book or adult book series? Is there a,
Well, first of all, if somebody doesn't like reading, and then I would say it depends on how old the person is, because if this person were old enough to read like something like Autopsy, I write my books for people that really don't like to read, because I've always had a hard time reading fiction. I admit it. And I love nonfiction. And so I try to write for those who, like me, may not get lost in something that they just can't, they don't believe it's real. But I know that, I don't know if about fantasy, but I do know that fantasy and science fiction can be a lot of fun too. A lot of kids read Harry Potter who weren't going to read. So but I'm not the best expert on that, I'm sorry to say. If all I can say is tell them to read me, that shows you I don't know very much.
Well, I can tell you from the fact that I have raised two, that both...
Who knows the answer to that?
Well, no, I can tell you that the Harry Potter book series, I think, changed certainly a generation or two.
It's your children's books. That's
yeah, no. Those are for little guys. I'm talking about young. I think she's talking about like young readers, young adult readers, people who are trying to find the love of reading. And I will tell you, my daughter, my elder daughter, Annie, is 35 years old, and every single year she rereads Harry Potter. They speak to her. They were a portal from her imagination, and the same thing that makes your book so great, the character intertwining, the sort of overall bigger picture story, and the central character or central characters, which your books have too. Yours are for a slightly more an older group. I just from my own experience, I can tell you that to see my 35-year-old daughter still enjoying a Harry Potter book makes someone like me, weirdly enough, when I was 12, I read James Clavell, all of his historical fiction, King Rat, Shogun. Like, I loved historical fiction. Just for the uninitiated, I do love a good historical fiction. I love history, and then I love the melding of then a good narrative into it. So I found that James Clavell books were really quite. I read King Rat, which is set in a prisoner of war camp, when I was 12. When I was on vacation with my father and his new family, and I was sort of isolated, and we were in this house, and there was in fact, look at this, weirdly enough, I still have the copy of King Rat that was on the shelf in.
I have the box. I have the boxcar children. See,
okay,
that was one of the things I read when I was little because I thought that was so cool. And I mean, I love the idea of children with no parents, and they're on their own and living in a little boxcar, and they go out and scavenge things, and they, it's really terribly sad and tragic and awful. But I used to read those, and I just happened to have one handy.
Yes, well, reading is, I think, for both of us, just it is a huge love for me. It is one of my favorite things to do, is to read. And I know you also. So here's the last question.
Well, let me just say one thing about that, though.
What?
I'm sorry. I know I'm off script. For those who
there
don't
is
like
no
to
script.
read, I know I'm being funny, trying to be. For those who don't really like to read, I think the thing to encourage is to remind them it's not an exercise. Reading is an interactive exercise. It is like playing tennis. You pick up the book, you start reading, and then you participate, and you hit the ball back, and it's going like this and like this. And once, if you can get somebody into it, they will never forget how much they love it, because you are creating something at the same time you're reading it. I didn't create all this book. You're creating it too when you read it.
So to that point, one of our listeners or partners here, Eric, you'll vote, V-A-U-D-T, help me people, said, of all things, I read Agatha Christie as a teenager. And I think that's a great suggestion, because
I love Agatha.
Those books are also incredibly well woven with character and story. So here's the last question. As we so perfectly timed I could, as you know, talk to you for many hours, and I will when this finishes. What's left on your bucket list? This is from Jessica Osborne. And it's a wonderful question, because you do a lot that many of us will never do, and then you write about it and we're all like, Okay. So what's left for you?
All right. If I'm going to be really brutally honest, I'll tell you what I would love someday to happen, but I don't expect it to happen, because I think there are other people who it'd be better for them than you don't need me to do. I'd like to go up in a rocket. I'd like to see Earth from space. I would love to go up there and see it for myself. I can't imagine. When William Shatner came down from doing that and was crying, it made me cry too. And I know, and I just thought, I would love to do that. But you know what? The nice thing is I've come so close to doing it anyway through all my simulated everything, that it may be better that other people get that treat and not me. But that would be on my bucket list, is to get to see that. I mean, I've always had this dream of being able to fly around the moon and look down on it. And I'm sure I won't do that. I won't live long enough probably for the moon. But you never know. I mean, I'd like Scarpetta to work something on the moon someday, and don't think I won't do that. Might do it remotely, but there's going to be some interesting things that happen up there.
Well, here's what I want to say, because I control the universe for another minute or so. I would like to say this. For all of the fans who are here on the Zoom, I think we just start a campaign on Twitter to get Patricia Cornwell into space.
Do I get a round trip, or are you just going to blast me off?
No, see, okay.
Depends on how the show does.
Lisa Grimes has already said she will start the campaign.
Oh, thank you.
You know what? That's how this happens, is that people do. I will send a message out to Jeff Bezos out there in the world, and I'll say, Mr. Bezos, send Ms. Cornwell to space, please. If you're going to send someone, send our friend Patricia, because we would all like to hear from her. Yes,
I will promise you this. if I ever get to go where few people have gone before and to see things for myself, I promise I will share them with everybody. And
Well, of course
Scarpetta
you
will
will.
share them. And we will write an awesome scene. And you guys will all have lots of fun talking about it. Hey, and just real quick, in case you don't know, the books that you're buying today
Oh,
are
yes.
signed.
Good.
And there aren't
Yes.
many that I signed, and some of them even have a little doodle in them. So just remember those if you want them for holiday presents, because those are the only books that I will be
Yes.
signing.
So
Out there.
that was part of my job, and I failed miserably.
No.
My part of my job was to say that this book copies that are available are signed, and it is the holiday coming up, and they make darn good holiday gifts.
I do want to remind you of something you said to me. I want to end on this, even though I'm not in charge right now, Jamie, that long ago when you were on stage with me for Depraved Heart, you looked at me in front of everybody and you said, how come there's nothing on TV or film? Why don't you try, you're going to have to try Craigslist to find somebody. Well, you shouldn't have said that because now, see?
I know. It's all good. Everybody, God bless you. Stay safe out there. Wear your masking. Wash your hands. Keep distant. Try to still have some fun. Life is for living. And yes, the additional copies are signed as well. Kelly Forrester. And Eric has a funny copy of Ripper with a doodle that you did.
Oh, good.
I'm trying to see if there's anything else. Carrie Medina said, I started reading your books because of my mom, and now your new book is her Christmas gift.
Oh, that's sweet.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you, everybody. Be safe.
Be safe, and this was super fun, and I love you so much, Patricia. And I love
you,
Stacey.
and I love everybody. Thank you.
So God bless you all. Stay safe, and this was super fun. Bye.
Thank you.